70 men, 300 feet down, 90 days on patrol, no windows, no privacy. So how did submariners deal with the lack of sex, especially when affection sometimes slipped past friendship on paper strict bans and lectures? Inside the boat, tighter, quieter truths. Watchmates who slept inches apart. Shared bunks still warm. Letters that said one thing and meant another. Shore leave everyone pretended not to define. Some skippers cracked down. Others only cared that the boat stayed silent and the torpedoes ran true. Official logs stay clean. Mess deck jokes and rumors suggest bonds that didn't fit the rule book comfort loyalty. Sometimes love all kept behind sealed hatches. We're not listing tricks. We'll follow the hints, orders, routines, and the small human bargains that kept crews steady when the ocean pressed in from every side. Tell me the exact time you're watching. Dawn watch or midnight dive? If this opened a side of submarine life you hadn't heard tap-like, so the next chapter can surface a little farther. You learn the truth the moment the hatch slams shut behind you. Welcome to the steel tube where privacy comes to die. That's the line an older petty officer throws over his shoulder while you climb down the ladder, and it hits harder than the metal rungs. Down here in this long, humming cylinder, packed with 70 or 90 men, you discover the real secret of submarine life. Your body doesn't stop being human just because your bedroom now has pipes, valves, and a stranger snoring 12 inches from your face. The air is thick, warm, and recycled so often it tastes like old socks. People imagine submariners as cold warriors gliding through oceans like silent predators, but the real experience is more like living inside a crowded laundry basket. The smell of diesel sweat, machine grease, and yesterday's hot sauce all blend together until every breath feels like a questionable decision. You shuffle forward, squeezing past sailors bent over consoles. Sailors brushing their teeth in a corner sink. Sailors trying to fold themselves into bunks the width of coffins. Your duffel catches on a pipe. Someone's elbow hits your ribs, and you lose count of how many shoulders you bump just walking 10 paces. If you ever wondered what it feels like to be a sardine, this is it, except sardines don't have hormones or awkward impulses to manage for months at a time. The chief gives you the orientation speech, which boils down to 3 main rules. Keep the boat running, don't break anything expensive, and don't make things weird. The unspoken rule, the one every submariner learns without being told, is even simpler. Your personal needs stay personal, even when nothing else in your life is. You take in your new bunk, a thin mattress, a curtain for privacy, and a shelf barely big enough for socks and a book. The curtain helps a little, but everyone knows fabric might hide your face, not your thoughts. One guy across from you jokes, there's more privacy in a crowded elevator. Everyone laughs, not because it's funny, but because it's true. The first night you lie there listening to the constant hum of machinery and the constant breathing of 30 other people. The boat feels alive, like a giant mechanical lung, inhaling and exhaling the same air you all share. You try to fall asleep, but your mind drifts to the obvious weeks without space, weeks without intimacy, weeks without anything resembling a normal outlet for desire. And the boat answers with a groan of steel as if mocking you. After a while, you start noticing how the lack of privacy shapes everything. A guy brushes past you in the passageway, and your shoulders touch because there's no room not to. Someone sits across from you in the mess knees, knocking yours. You sleep 6 inches above another man's face. You wake up when someone else's alarm goes off. You lift weights next to the torpedoes, and even then people stand close enough that you can feel the heat from their skin. Imagine trying to forget you have a body in a place where everyone's body is basically in your lap. But there's something else too, an unspoken camaraderie. Everyone on this boat is working through the same physical tension, the same frustration, the same long nights of pent-up energy. and nowhere to put it. And nobody says it out loud. It becomes a kind of shared joke, a collective endurance challenge, like a marathon with worse smells. Now and then you hear older sailors tell harmless stories. One guy explains how on diesel boats in Wawiwu, men slept between torpedoes because there weren't enough bunks. Try feeling flirty when your pillow is sitting on top of a weapon designed to sink ships, he says. Another laughs about the no romance, no problem policies that existed on submarines long before psychologists started giving official recommendations. Humor becomes the pressure valve, the safe way to talk about desire without actually talking about desire. And the truth is, your body eventually adapts. Not because the urges vanish, but because the schedule swallows them. You stand watch, clean the bilges, eat, sleep, and repeat until the cycle blurs. The boat trains your brain the same way boot camp trained your muscles by sheer repetition. Routine becomes your best distraction, your built-in survival tool. Every now and then, your thoughts drift to the world above. People on land worry about things like dating apps and awkward first dinners. Down here, your biggest romantic gesture is giving someone your extra packet of powdered cocoa. You start asking strange questions in your head. How did sailors 100 years ago cope? Did they just grit their teeth? Did anyone actually talk about it? Even now you can feel the question hovering in the dim red lighting over your bunk. How do you live in a sealed metal tube for weeks without the most basic forms of release affection or physical connection? How do you cope with desire when you can't escape? Can't find a quiet corner, and can't even turn your back without brushing someone's elbow. You breathe in, smell the diesel again, hear another sailor shifting in the bunk above you. You close your eyes and wonder how long until your body fully gives in to submarine time, the strange rhythm where everything human gets folded, compressed, and stored in the same place as your socks. You wake up to the soft thump of someone's knee brushing your curtain. Then the low murmur of voices coming off watch. The red night lighting makes everything look like a dream you didn't fully enter. You peel yourself out of the bunk, feet hitting the cold deck, and begin the shuffle that every submariner learns, the sideways crab walk that gets you through a passageway without body checking half the crew. And right away, you're reminded of the strange double life down here. The Navy's official rulebook versus the submarine's actual reality. The rulebook talks about discipline, honor, composure, and maintaining appropriate conduct at all times. On paper, it sounds noble, firm, like something written for statues in a park. But on the mess deck, with someone's elbow in your ribs and 50 men trying to eat in a space smaller than a modern studio apartment, the whole concept of appropriate starts to feel like an inside joke. You take your seat practically in someone's lap and reach for breakfast, powdered eggs, canned potatoes, and coffee strong enough to wake a lighthouse. Across from you, a sailor with permanently sleepy eyes grins. "So ready to be a paragon of naval virtue today," he says, raising his mug like a toast. You answer with a snort, because that's exactly how the whole crew handles the gap between rules and reality, with humor so dry it could sand a wooden deck. The officers give talks, sometimes short ones, mostly about professionalism, focus, and maintaining clear boundaries. And everyone nods politely, because they're right in theory. But you try keeping clear boundaries in a space where the entire population of the boat is never more than 2 feet away. One wrong turn, and you're practically hugging the sonar technician. One sudden stop, and you collide with a torpedo man so hard the two of you share the same breath for a second. The Navy expects restraint, dignity, and spotless conduct. The submarine gives you sweat, boredom, close quarters stress, and a hormone cocktail that no manual can tidy up. So the crew invents its own way of dealing with attention humor. Endless, relentless humor. Not crude, in fact. The funniest jokes are the ones that dance around the subject without touching anything sensitive. It's a skill. A kind of linguistic gymnastics. A sailor might say, well, that's one way to shake the frustration out after someone drops a wrench. Or, careful, you'll make the boat blush. Or, 3 months underwater, and the only curves we see are bulkheads. The entire boat becomes a comedy club powered by equal parts exhaustion and imagination. And in its own twisted way, it works. Humor keeps people sane. Humor keeps things from boiling over. Humor lets everyone acknowledge the obvious without crossing any lines. And it's been this way for generations. You hear older submariners talk about the diesel boat days, when crews went weeks without showering, living in a stew of sweat and stress. If you didn't laugh, one veteran tells you while scrubbing his mug you'd blow a gasket. He taps his temple for emphasis. In here, I mean. Engines can be fixed. Brains are finicky things. Sometimes the chaplain visits before deployment. He gives a short pep talk in the wardroom about moral strength and staying committed to values. And the officers listen politely. But the enlisted crew, they hear a different message between the lines. Not scolding or pressure, but something more subtle. You're human. You're not broken. This is hard, and it's always been hard. You finish breakfast and squeeze past a knot of sailors heading to their stations. Someone bumps into your shoulder and mutters an apology. Someone else slips past with a tray of tools. You keep moving, because that's the only rule that truly works down here. Stay in motion, stay flexible, stay patient. And slowly you realize something important. The Navy's speeches may insist on moral clarity, but the mess deck teaches a more practical truth. People survive not by ignoring desire, but by refusing to let it dominate the boat. By keeping things light, by joking, venting, and occasionally giving each other the kind of look that says, yeah, I get it. Same boat, literally. It's not denial, it's not repression. It's a kind of mutual pact. We're all dealing with this. Nobody makes it weird. Nobody makes it heavy. We walk the line together. You can almost imagine Admiral Nimitz himself raising an eyebrow at the everyday reality below the waterline. During the Pacific War, many submarine patrols lasted so long that sailors joked their hair grew back twice between ports. And yet somehow, they endured the same problem you're now living, weeks of close quarters. Strong bodies and absolutely no personal space. If they managed, you think then maybe this boat, its sweat, its humor, its unspoken rules, knows exactly how to keep a crew running without letting the unfixable human parts get in the way. You slide into the control room for your shift, the hum of machinery settling into your bones again. Someone cracks a joke about romance with the radar console and the whole room laughs. The day moves on. And so does the unspoken understanding that everyone's carrying the same restless pulse under their uniforms. The shift drifts into that steady rhythm submariners know too well. Machines buzzing like mechanical bees, red lights blinking in quiet patterns, and you floating through it all half awake, half alert. Your brain works on 2 tracks, one that watches gauges and listens for changes in engine tone, and another that keeps you sane by wandering wherever it wants. And strangely, it's that wandering part that becomes your real refuge down here. Because when you live in a place with absolutely no physical privacy, the only private territory left is the space behind your eyes. Your mind becomes your room, your escape hatch, your last square foot of freedom. You catch yourself leaning back during a quiet watch, staring at a blank bulkhead, and slipping into a daydream so vivid it almost smells like fresh air. You think about your partner back home, or the partner you hope to have someday. The memory of a hug, the warmth of a hand on your shoulder, the look in someone's eyes when they laugh, those become treasures more valuable than the gold in Fort Knox. Down here, a happy memory is better than coffee. And in a strange way, it becomes its own form of survival. The safe version of closeness that doesn't break rules or make the boat uncomfortable. Every submariner has their own strategy. Some replay moments from shore leave, like favorite scenes in a movie. Some imagine being in sunlight again, not even romantic, just warm. Some picture future plans, like building a house, raising a family, or finally eating barbecue that's not stored in a can. And sometimes when everyone's quiet and the boat glides through deep water like a metal whale, your mind creates an entire world where pressure noise and crowded bunks don't exist. But fantasy isn't the only refuge. Memory is powerful too. You hear sailors reminiscing about long-gone days, someone describing the smell of pine forests, someone else talking about a high school sweetheart, another quietly sharing how good it felt just to sit on a couch without hearing machinery thump behind the walls. Real ordinary moments suddenly feel like miracles. In between tasks, you find yourself studying the edges of photos pinned near bunks, beaches, pets, people smiling in sunlight. There's something almost magical about how these tiny rectangles of paper can silence the mind for a few seconds. You catch yourself wondering, if someone took a photo of us right now, what would it even look like? A bunch of exhausted men stuffed into a steel thermos. You laugh at the thought quietly. Humor is still the best companion you've got. On long patrols, the boat's library. If you can call a milk crate full of paperbacks a library, becomes a sanctuary. You grab a worn novel lie in your bunk and let the story wash over you. A good book tricks your senses into believing you're somewhere else. A quiet field, a crowded city, a time when nobody cared about sonar contacts or oxygen levels. Now and then, you wonder if the officers know how much of the crew's sanity depends on these mental escapes. Maybe they do. Maybe that's why they always make room for at least a shoebox of books and allow headphones during downtime. After all, a distracted sailor is manageable. A frustrated sailor with nowhere to put his thoughts. That's a hazard. Sometimes a friend nudges you during a lull and whispers, "Hey, if you could teleport anywhere right now, where would you go?" It's a simple question, but the answers reveal everything. One guy says home. Another says a beach. Another says a quiet cabin in the woods. One joker says anywhere with a functioning mattress and no diesel smell. You realize people aren't longing for excitement. They're longing for peace, comfort, closeness. The simple human things submarines accidentally teach you to treasure. And occasionally, imagination blends with frustration in ways you have to quietly manage. You lie in your bunk curtain drawn, trying to sleep while the boat rocks gently, and your thoughts drift somewhere warm, somewhere private, somewhere entirely your own. The hum of air scrubbers becomes a kind of white noise that lets your brain loosen its knots. Sure, your body still complains it doesn't magically forget it's human, but your mind learns how to steer the ship when the rest of you can't move an inch. That's the silent skill submariners develop without ever being trained for it, turning the cramped, steel-walled nowhere into a personal sanctuary made entirely of thought. By the time your shift ends, you stretch your stiff neck, step out into the passageway, and feel strangely lighter. Not because anything changed physically, but because your imagination bought you a few minutes of freedom. And in a world where the nearest patch of land is thousands of feet above your head, that counts for more than anyone on the surface will ever understand. Calendars become confessions the moment the boat dives beneath the waves. It hits you fast. This steel tube runs on diesel sweat and carefully controlled temptation. That's the truth you feel in your bones the first time you walk past the mess and see a sailor taping a postcard to the bulkhead like it's a religious relic. You stop for a moment, pretending to check a gauge, and your eyes drift to the images scattered around the compartment. Nothing inappropriate, nothing even close, but just suggestive enough to remind you that the outside world still exists. A smiling movie star from the 1940s. A beach snapshot taken by someone's cousin. A postcard showing a sunlit pier with a woman in a summer dress waving at the camera. These tiny, harmless pictures are the submarine version of Windows' small, cheap, and gloriously fake. The Navy knows about them. Everyone knows. And the funny part? The brass allows just enough of it to keep the crew stable, but not enough to turn the walls into a collage of trouble. It's a delicate balance, almost an art form. Morale management, an officer once called it. But every submariner knows the real phrase, pressure valve. You pass the torpedo room later and spot a couple sailors sitting near the racks, flipping through an old magazine. Again, nothing forbidden. Just ads, movie posters, a few swimsuit shots from a decade no one remembers correctly. The two men grin like they've discovered buried treasure. One nudges you and says, "Look at this sun sand and people who actually have elbow room." It gets a laugh because that's what these pictures really offer. Not desire, but distance. A reminder that life isn't always this dim red, metal-bolted maze. The images soften the sharp edges of confinement. They let you breathe emotionally the way the air scrubbers keep you breathing physically. And it's not new. Old diesel boat veterans talk about pin-ups the same way archaeologists talk about pottery shards. They'll say, "Back in '44, we had a photo of Rita Hayworth that survived 3 patrols, 2 engine fires, and 1 very judgmental chaplain. The whole crew would protect it like a mascot." The reason wasn't lust, it was shared humanity. Something warm, something light, something normal taped to a wall that was anything but. You catch yourself stopping by the images sometimes when you're off watch. Not staring, just taking them in for a few seconds. The beach scene. The actress with the coy smile. The postcard of a girl waving at a carnival. It's strange how powerful a simple picture becomes when you haven't seen sunlight for weeks. People on land might shrug at such things, but underwater, they are mood stabilizers disguised as glossy rectangles. There's a rhythm to how sailors handle them. Someone finds an old calendar in storage. Someone else swaps out a postcard that's gotten too faded. A movie star's smile becomes the unofficial mascot of a compartment. A beach photo rotates among bunks like a traveling good luck charm. No one ever says why it helps. They don't need to. One sailor, an older sonar tech with a beard that always looks one day past regulations, explains it better than any psychologist. It's not about wanting something. It's about remembering you're still built to want things. He adjusts a dial, checks a flickering light, then adds, "This place numbs you. Pictures help unnumb you." You nod because you feel it too. The longer you're down here, the more your senses flatten out. The recycled air, the artificial lighting, the lack of sunlight or fresh wind, it dulls everything. And those pictures, soft light, bright colors, summer dresses fluttering in a breeze, you can almost imagine bring back a spark of warmth. A few sailors keep tiny photo albums tucked into their bunks. Family portraits, high school snapshots, a picture of a partner framed by a messy bedroom mirror. You notice how carefully those albums are handled, opened slowly, touched gently, never left out for others to paw through. Some men glance at them every night before bed, like a ritual. Others only when the loneliness hits hard. It isn't romantic in a dramatic, cinematic way. It's grounding. A quiet reminder of connection, belonging memory. Those images become anchors that keep the mind from drifting into the darker parts of isolation. Once, during a long stretch of silence, a shipmate beside you taps his pocket, where his album sits, and murmurs, "This keeps me stable more than any chaplain ever has." He chuckles softly. Chaplain keeps the soul in order. Photos keep the brain from melting. You laugh quietly because it's exactly right. Later, walking back to your bunk, you catch the postcard wall again, soft reds and yellows glowing in the dim lighting. Sunsets, beaches' warm faces. They feel like stolen warmth smuggled into the deep. And in a world where desire is something you manage, not indulge these little pictures, do something miraculous. They let you feel human without tipping the balance of the boat. You push your curtain aside, settle into the narrow bunk, and find yourself thinking of the bright colors outside your steel cocoon. You hear distant machinery humming. Someone coughs. Someone else mutters in their sleep. And the postcards, still glowing faintly in your mind, give the darkness a softer edge. You wake from a short, shallow sleep to the sound of mail being passed out, a ritual that looks deceptively simple, but feels almost sacred. A petty officer moves down the passageway, holding a small bundle of envelopes, like he's carrying the crown jewels. Whenever the boat is lucky enough to surface near a supply ship or relay the outside world, squeezes itself into these thin, crinkled rectangles. And for submariners dealing with months of bottled-up frustration, nothing quiets the mind faster than the sight of handwriting you recognize. When your name is called, you feel a flutter in your chest that no amount of exhaustion can dampen. You take the envelope carefully, as if the paper might crumble. The corner is smudged, maybe from rain or dockside handling, maybe from the fingers of someone you miss. And for a moment before you even open it, you imagine the scent of home-warm kitchens, real air, sunlight on clotheslines. You slide a finger under the flap as the boat hums steadily around you. Inside, the familiar handwriting leans across the page. It's nothing dramatic, small updates, tiny details, the kind of life you're not living right now. Someone's new garden, a neighbor's new dog, the grocery store being out of flour again. But down here, these simple glimpses feel like oxygen for your brain. What the letter doesn't mention, and doesn't need to, is everything between the lines. The waiting, the missing, the unspoken questions. Those parts you read silently, instinctively, like subtitles only you can see. You fold the letter slowly, rereading a sentence that makes you smile without realizing it. And suddenly the whole boat seems a little less claustrophobic. Not wider exactly, but less tight. A submarine is still a metal tube, but a metal tube connected to someone's handwriting becomes something softer. Around you, other sailors are doing the same thing. One wipes his eyes when he thinks no one's looking. Another holds a picture against the bulkhead for a long moment. Someone whispers a quiet thank you under their breath. And in that strange symphony of whispers, rustling paper and diesel hum, you feel the presence of 100 people who aren't on the boat, but matter just as much as the ones who are. On the flip side, not everyone gets mail every time. Across the mess, a younger sailor flips over his placemat, trying to hide the disappointment. You hand him a piece of chocolate from your stash. He smiles weakly, accepts it, and shrugs. Maybe next month, he says. And you nod because you know the truth out here. Hope is measured in envelopes. After mail call, the boat settles back into routine, but morale rises noticeably. Sailors stand taller, smile easier. Someone even hums while cleaning the galley. It's proof that emotional survival on a submarine isn't built on discipline alone. It's built on connection, held at arm's length, stretched across oceans, folded into letters. During your break, you head to the aft compartment and sit where the pipes run overhead like tangled steel vines. You lean back and reread the letter, letting every word settle. Your fingers trace the edges, and for a moment, you imagine being on the other side of the world, where the sky is open and decisions involve more than valves, sonar, and watch rotations. You start writing a reply slowly, carefully. A pen in a submarine feels heavier somehow. You don't want to sound too tired or too frustrated. You don't want to worry the person waiting ashore. So you write about little victories. The cook making good bread, a movie night with the crew, the sea being calm today. You slip in a joke or two, the kind that only lands if someone knows you well. Then you add one true sentence at the end, the one that actually matters. Thinking of you keeps me steady down here. You stop there because you don't want to spill too much out. Submariners learn to ration emotion the same way they ration space. Someone nearby leans over and whispers, "Remember when crews in WW2 went 4 months without mail?" You nod. It's mentioned often down here, like a warning and a rallying cry. Sailors then wrote letters they couldn't send, tucked them into journals, saved them for the day when the boat would finally surface, and a plane could deliver the bundle home. One officer once shared a story about a wartime skipper who gathered the crew to read one letter aloud, not because of romance, but because the words described grass sunlight and children laughing. The men needed that, the officer said. Needed to remember what normal sounds like. Back in your bunk later, you tuck the letter into the small shelf beside your pillow. You don't need to hide it. Privacy doesn't exist here, but everyone respects the bubble around each person's mail. It's the one boundary nobody jokes about. Even the most talkative sailor grows quiet when someone is reading a letter, as if the whole compartment instinctively understands that something delicate is happening. Lights dim. The hum of machinery grows steady and soothing. Someone walks by their steps, soft on the metal deck. And you lie there, eyes half closed, feeling the warmth of the words you read echo softly inside your chest. Letters can't replace touch. They can't solve loneliness. But they transform it, turning raw ache into something gentler, like waves smoothing sharp stones. You breathe slow, fold your hands against your chest, and let your mind drift to the person whose handwriting now rests inches from your heart. The boat creaks, the ocean presses in, but for now, you feel anchored by something far more powerful than steel. You don't even make it halfway through your next shift before you notice it again, that strange electric tension that lives in the tight gaps between submariners. It's not dramatic or dangerous. It's just human. When you trap dozens of young, stressed, exhausted people in a steel cylinder where everyone breathes the same air and eats the same powdered potatoes, the lines between closeness humor and something more complicated start to bend in odd directions. You pass through the passageway, brushing shoulders with sailors squeezing in the opposite direction. No one apologizes, they can't. There's physically no way to move without touching someone. Shoulders bump, elbows graze, legs press together in the mess, and sometimes the accidental contact feels warmer than it should. But nobody comments on it. That's the unspoken code. You feel it, you ignore it, you move on. Still, the tight quarters shape everything. Friendships on the surface feel casual, simple. Down here, they grow fast, intense, almost accelerated by pressure like carbon turning to diamond. A bunkmate who jokes with you on day 2 might feel like a brother by week 3. You trust him with valves, tools, secrets, sleep schedules, and sometimes your sanity. But intense closeness has its shadows. One night, while wiping down equipment in the control room, you overhear a couple sailors laughing quietly about an incident from another boat. A crew that once tried to write affection guidelines after the command got nervous about close friendships forming during long patrols. The sailors telling the story laugh so hard they can barely breathe. Imagine trying to regulate human feelings on a submarine, one says. Might as well regulate gravity. And he's right. Humans don't stop being humans just because someone wrote a rule. Humans bond. Humans joke. Humans sometimes feel attracted to people they trust or admire or simply see more often than sunlight. But the power of submariner culture is that it channels everything back into camaraderie. Nobody fans the spark. Nobody weaponizes it. Nobody crosses lines that would break the delicate balance. Instead, you learn to filter emotions the way the boat filters air, constantly, quietly, carefully. A glance that lingers too long, turn it into a joke. A moment where two sailors laugh a bit too easily together, let it pass with a smile. A sudden warmth you don't fully understand, file it under "not my business" and move on. Respect becomes the unofficial religion. Not the stiff ceremony version, but the lived-in respect of people who share the same oxygen supply. The rule is simple. Whatever someone feels is their own private ocean, and as long as they're professional, no one digs deeper. You see this in small ways. A sailor who starts looking overwhelmed gets extra support on his shift without anyone asking why. Someone who's withdrawn gets invited to play cards or watch a movie. Someone who seems anxious gets paired with a steady hand during maintenance checks. The boat takes care of its own quietly and instinctively. But there's another side to this closeness. The kind that comes out during long conversations, whispered after midnight. You find yourself sitting with a shipmate near the engine room, talking about things you'd never bring up on the surface. Life, fear, family, what you miss most, what you wish you understood about yourself. Not confessions, just honesty sharpened by steel walls and low lighting. In those moments, the taboo subject everyone tiptoes around becomes almost philosophical. Someone might say, "Funny how being stuck down here makes you notice things you'd ignore topside." And you answer, "Funny how being human doesn't turn off." He nods, and that's the entire conversation. No awkwardness, no judgment. Just two sailors acknowledging the truth that emotions get weird underwater. Sometimes it gets trickier. A quiet glance between two sailors that lasts just a second too long. A laugh that's a little too eager. A shared bunk curtain half open when someone wakes up from a nightmare and crawls down to talk. But even then, nothing crosses the line. Submarine culture polices itself, not with punishment, but with understanding. Mutual attraction, unspoken attraction, occasional confusion. It all gets folded into the same container labeled human stuff we manage professionally. During a break, someone tells you a story about a Cold War captain who once said, "I don't care who you are or what you feel. Just don't let it compromise the boat." It's become a kind of proverb down here. People laugh when they repeat it, but it's not a joke. It's the truth, simple, practical, fair. You take a sip of lukewarm coffee and look around the mess. Everyone is pressed together, elbow to elbow, eating, joking, living in a space the size of a bus interior. The warmth, the banter, the occasional awkwardness, it's all part of the same strange puzzle. You realize something important. The submarine doesn't erase attraction. It doesn't erase longing. It doesn't erase the messy, unpredictable parts of human nature. It just forces you to handle them with grace. Softly, silently, safely. Because down here every emotion is amplified, every boundary is thinner, and every mistake would echo through the boat like sonar. You finish your coffee, stand up carefully, and squeeze past the next sailor with the practiced ease of someone who knows the choreography by heart. The diesel hum grows louder. The overhead pipes rattle softly. And the crew continues their delicate dance, balancing closeness without tipping into chaos, friendship, without blurring into something that could complicate the mission. It's the quietest balancing act in military life. And somehow everyone performs it perfectly without ever saying a word. The next morning starts with a hook that hits harder than caffeine. You can seal a hatch, but you can't seal a human mind. It's a truth you feel every time discipline tightens around the boat like a metal belt. Because the deeper you go, the more the Navy leans on the one thing it can still control: routine. The chaplain's voice drifts through the compartment during a scheduled morale check. He's not always on board, but before deployment he gave a quiet talk in the wardroom, the kind meant to soothe nerves without admitting that sailors have nerves in the first place. Strength, clarity, service, restraint, he used all the usual words. But you saw something else in the officers' faces that day. Not sternness, not judgment, but hope that the crew could keep themselves steady for the long haul. Discipline on a submarine feels different than discipline anywhere else. On land, rules are lines on paper. Down here, rules are survival. You follow them not because someone's watching, but because you can't afford the emotional domino effect that comes from crossing one. There's no room for drama, no room for grudges, and definitely no room for anything that threatens the tight chemistry keeping this steel tube calm and functional. So the boat uses structure like a shield. Watch rotations, maintenance cycles, drills that happen so often you could run them half asleep. Fitness sessions squeezed between torpedo racks. Even mandatory movie nights when the XO decides morale needs a nudge upward. Everything exists to keep your brain busy, your body working, and your impulses corralled into something manageable. You see it during morning checks. The chief moves through the compartments with a clipboard. Eyes sharp, voice steady, giving orders so clean they almost have a rhythm. A rhythm that takes your thoughts, your tension, your restlessness, and grinds them into something predictable. The structure forces your emotions into neat rows, like tools in a rack. Someone beside you mutters, "This is how they keep us from going crazy," and you don't disagree. When your mind wanders, discipline snaps it back. When your body stirs with frustration, routine smooths the edges. When the closeness on board threatens to turn into something confusing, work becomes an anchor. But the discipline isn't cold. It's strangely compassionate. The officers know what the crew is battling beneath the surface. They don't say it out loud, but they steer the boat's schedule like a shepherd, steering a restless flock. More drills. When tempers rise, more rest. When boredom gets heavy. Simple tasks. When stress spikes. Humor. When needed, quiet. When demanded. During a drill, you feel how effective it is. The clacks and blares, sailors sprint into position, and suddenly there's no room in your head for longing, tension, or anything except procedure. Your body moves through memorized steps, sealing a hatch, checking gauges, relaying information. That intense, consuming focus becomes a strange relief. When it ends, someone wipes sweat from his forehead and says, "At least it stops us thinking too much." Everyone laughs because down here humans don't fear hard work. They fear idle minds. Discipline also protects you from the complications of attraction. No matter what feelings simmer under the surface, friendship, curiosity, admiration, even unspoken chemistry, routine bottles it up neatly. The boat doesn't shame you for being human. It just never gives your mind enough empty space to wander into dangerous territory. And you see how much the brass depends on this subtle psychological machinery. Even the chaplain's talks follow a pattern: reassurance, without prying, guidance, without pressure. He knows he can't preach desire away, but he can frame it, wrap it in ideas like loyalty, patience, dignity, and endurance. You remember him saying softly before deployment, "There's nothing wrong with longing. Just remember that longing doesn't steer the boat you do, it's stuck with you." Maybe because it was the closest anyone ever came to acknowledging the elephant in the room without naming it. Later, during meal prep, the cook bangs a ladle on a pot and calls out, "Keep your hands busy, lads." Idle hands are how we end up cleaning bilges for fun. Again, laughter. That's how the boat deals with everything, one joke at a time, slipped between strict rules like padding. The structure never stops. Even in your bunk, the clock rules you. Sleep when you're told. Wake when you're told. Your body becomes a machine synced to the submarine's pulse. And in that mechanical rhythm, the more chaotic parts of being human quiet down. Not disappear, just soften like a wave turning to foam before it hits the hull. During evening checks, you catch yourself thinking about how strange it is the Navy fights human nature with schedules, alarms, drills, and gentle guidance. And somehow, it works. The deeper the boat dives, the tighter the discipline becomes, until personal desire feels like something folded into a compartment and strapped down for safety. You climb into your bunk, listening to the faint echo of boots moving through the passageway. Routine settles around you like a blanket, thin, scratchy, but steady. The hum of machinery blends with the soft breathing of sailors all around you. Your body relaxes, not because it's free, but because the structure holds you in place, like a harness keeping you safe in turbulent air. Somewhere in the distance, a valve hisses softly. Someone shifts in their sleep, and discipline, quiet, invisible, constant, keeps the peace better than any speech ever could. Shore leave doesn't come often, but when it does, the rush that sweeps through the boat feels almost volcanic. After weeks underwater, the promise of open sky, and more importantly, open space hits every sailor like a shockwave. You feel it before the hatch even cracks open, the fidgeting, the nervous jokes, the impatient glances toward the ladder. Someone mutters, "I'd kiss the pier when we dock, but it probably smells worse than we do." Another replies, "Doesn't matter. It's dry land. I'll take it." The boat surfaces near a friendly port. The engines hum down, and suddenly the world beyond steel walls is real again. You climb topside and gulp air that doesn't taste like machine heat or recycled breath. Even the smell of fish markets and diesel from nearby ships feels luxurious, like the planet is greeting you personally. And then comes Liberty Call. The moment the officer gives permission, the crew streams off like a stampede with half the coordination and all the enthusiasm. You join the flow boots, hitting solid ground harder than you mean to. It takes a minute to realize why your legs forgot what real gravity feels like. You head toward town, following a river of uniforms, toward the same cluster of streets. Every port seems to have bars, glowing with neon music spilling from open doorways, and the unmistakable energy of people who haven't breathed free air in weeks. Bars become unofficial decompression chambers for submariners. The dim lighting, clinking glasses, and endless chatter do something to your brain. It's like the noise of the boat gets replaced by a different kind of noise, lighter, looser, human, in a way steel hallways never allow. You sip your drink and feel warmth return to parts of your mind you forgot existed. Some sailors talk loudly about food, real food, not powdered eggs or canned stew. Others play darts with the kind of intensity normally reserved for sonar contacts. A few disappear into quieter corners, calling home on old payphones, or writing postcards with shaky hands. The younger sailors, the ones experiencing their first long patrol buzz with energy, like they're powered by electricity instead of adrenaline. Shore leave turns them into explorers of a strange new world where personal freedom exists again. Of course, every port has its red light distractors, the sort of streets sailors have been warned about since navies first put ships to sea. But the submarine community lives by a very simple rule. The boat is your lifeline, so don't do anything ashore that you'd be ashamed to tell the chief about. It's not just morality, it's survival. Nobody wants drama following them back into a steel tube with 70 witnesses. So instead, the crew indulges in the safer thrills, late-night food, too many songs, too many beers, too many stories that will grow bigger with each retelling. If there's a wild side, it's usually just sailors staying up too late, laughing too loud, dancing without rhythm, or daring each other to try local snacks that glow questionably under streetlights. The kind of chaos that makes good memories not trouble. And yet beneath all the noise, there's always a softer undercurrent, the emotional release nobody admits openly. That months-long loneliness that attaches itself to small moments. A warm smile from someone working behind the bar. A kind word from a stranger, even the simple act of standing far enough away from your crew that your thoughts finally feel like your own again. You notice it in yourself, too. After the first hour, when the initial rush fades, you step outside and lean against a railing overlooking the water. The breeze feels unreal. You watch lights ripple across the harbor and wonder why peace seems louder than any party. A friend joins you holding 2 drinks. Careful, he says, handing you one. This is the moment where people start thinking too much. You laugh because he's right. Shore leave is where submariners confront everything they can't confront. Underwater longing, solitude, fear, desire, the strange ache of wanting connection in a life defined by isolation. But the trick is balance. You let the feelings surface without letting them drown you. That's why the bars stay busy. The music stays loud and the crew keeps each other close. For every sailor leaning out into the night, thinking heavy thoughts, there's another dragging him back in with a shout of, "Hey, they're playing our song later." As you head back to the boat, you feel that odd mixture of release and regret. The classic shore leave hangover, not from alcohol, but from emotion. The taste of freedom is sweet, but its aftertaste reminds you of everything you're about to give up again. Space, air, noise, strangers, the possibility of connection that isn't filtered through steel walls. The boat looms in the darkness, quiet and familiar. You climb aboard, boots hitting metal again, and you feel the shift instantly. Responsibilities return like a tide. But something inside you has reset. The pressure in your chest is lighter. The loneliness in your bones feels less sharp. You take one last look at the fading lights of town, glowing like promises you'll revisit someday. Then you climb below deck, the hatch closes, and the submarine swallows the world again. But this time, you bring a little warmth back inside with you. Life in the newer nuclear-powered submarines feels like stepping into the future, but a future that still can't escape the limits of human nature. Everything is sleeker, cooler, quieter. The air is cleaner, the boat is longer, the bunks are slightly less coffin-shaped, and the lights don't flicker like they're haunted. But even as technology leaps forward, one truth remains unchanged. People don't stop longing just because the equipment got an upgrade. You notice it immediately. The nuclear boat moves with a smooth, endless glide, like it's skating beneath the ocean rather than pushing through it. Gone are the diesel fumes that once clung to your clothes. Gone is the constant thump of engines fighting the waves. Instead, you get a soft, steady hum that sinks into your skin, a white noise that makes it far too easy for your thoughts to wander. And that's where modern submariners face a strange paradox. The quieter the boat becomes, the louder the mind gets. You walk the length of the vessel during your watch and feel the contrast everywhere. Stainless steel panels, digital displays, sonar screens glowing with soft blue waves. Everything feels polished in a way old submariners would have called luxurious, though anyone else would still call it a hallway the width of a refrigerator. But with better tech comes longer patrols. Nuclear reactors don't need to surface for air. Food becomes the limiting factor, not fuel. Which means a deployment that once lasted 6 weeks can now stretch into 4 months or more, plenty of time for frustration to steep like overbrewed tea. On long patrols, you see the psychological strain settle in the same way frost creeps onto windows, slowly, quietly, almost beautifully, if it didn't feel so heavy. A sailor sighs more often. Another taps his foot nonstop. Someone else keeps flipping through the same 3 photos, like they hold secret messages. It's not dramatic. It's just the slow erosion that comes from being sealed underwater with nothing but recycled air and thoughts you can't outrun. One evening, while you're eating in the mess, a younger sailor asks, "How did the Cold War crews handle this? Didn't they go out for months without seeing sunlight?" An older chief answers without looking up from his tray, "They did what we do. They held themselves together with routine humor and snacks they didn't want to share." Then he smirks. And denial. Lots of denial. The table erupts in laughter because everyone knows denial is probably the submarine's most underrated safety mechanism. But Cold War submariners also paved the way for modern coping strategies. You hear stories of boats staying submerged so long, the crew started naming the condensation droplets on the pipes. They wrote elaborate jokes on whiteboards. They played chess tournaments that lasted weeks. Some men learned entire languages between watches. Not because they were studious, because keeping the mind occupied was the only way to keep everything else in check. You see echoes of that now. A sonar technician spends his downtime composing music on a laptop. A machinist mate makes origami out of maintenance logs. Someone starts a running debate about which city has the best sandwiches. And you learn the ancient submarine art of pacing the same 8 feet of hallway while pretending it's a scenic walk. Modern submarines even have better sleep cycles with dimmable lights that mimic night and day. But artificial sunrise mode isn't enough to stop your mind from drifting toward the same old frustrations. No matter how advanced the lighting gets, it can't replicate the feeling of another person's touch, or the warmth of real intimacy, or the simple luxury of closing a door and being alone. Mixed crews make things even more interesting. Officially, professionalism is absolute, and everyone follows it. Unofficially, it simply adds another layer of silent, careful discipline, like walking with a cup of hot tea and trying not to spill. People keep things respectful, distant, tightly contained. The Navy monitors everything meticulously, fully aware that curiosity, attraction, and boredom are not erasable variables. Once during a quiet moment in the control room, a sailor leans toward you and says, "Technology solves everything except loneliness." He says it casually, as if commenting on the weather, but the truth of it sinks deep. Even in a nuclear-powered fortress, human beings still carry the same ancient instincts: connection, affection, the need to be seen. And ironically, the more advanced the boat is, the more it feels like a test of emotional endurance. No diesel fumes to distract you. No constant rocking to keep your mind busy. Just smooth, endless silence and the quiet realization that the deepest battles on a submarine aren't fought with torpedoes, but with whatever thoughts you can't turn off. You move through compartments, nodding at tired faces, each one grappling with the same unspoken ache. Not desire alone, connection. The need to touch the world again. The longing for something soft, warm, and human in a place made entirely of steel and pressure gauges. Yet despite all of it, the crew endures. Routine holds, respect holds. The humor doesn't fade. And the boat keeps moving forward through the black water, carrying a group of people who have mastered the art of surviving storms no one topside will ever see. You settle into your bunk later, feeling the vibration of the reactor somewhere deep below. You breathe slow, let the hum cradle your thoughts, and understand exactly why modern submariners still struggle the same way their grandfathers did. Technology evolves. Steel evolves. But the human heart doesn't. You wake to a quiet that feels different, not the usual submarine hush, but something heavier as if the ocean itself is pausing to listen. And before you even sit up, the hook hits you in the chest. It turns out the deepest part of submarine life isn't the ocean. It's everything you carry inside. The boat hums the same as always, steady and familiar, but you sense a shift. Maybe it's the nearing end of deployment. Maybe it's the weight of all the days behind you. Or maybe it's the simple truth that modern submariners still wrestle with the same ancient questions, no matter how advanced the machinery gets. You step out of your bunk and feel the familiar tightness of the passageway. The same red lights, the same faces. Yet something in you is softer now, quieter, more aware. You walk toward the mess, and the crew is already awake, some sipping coffee, some picking at breakfast, some staring into space, with that glazed look submariners get after too many weeks without sky. The conversations drift like lazy currents, jokes repeated. For the 50th time, complaints about powdered eggs, discussions about what food they'll eat first when they reach land. But beneath the chatter lies the same quiet thread connecting everyone here. The knowledge that solitude, longing, and emotional restraint have shaped this journey just as much as drills and machinery. You slide into your seat, knees knocking the guy beside you. He doesn't mind. Nobody minds anything that involves contact anymore. It's just part of the environment, as natural as pressure gauges and the hiss of valves. He glances over and grins. Almost there, he says. You nod. Not because you're counting days, but because you're counting feelings, all the things you've packed away into corners of your mind since the day the hatch closed. Nearby, two sailors are comparing shore leave hopes. One wants to see his partner. One wants to sleep in a bed that doesn't sway. And another half-joking, half-sincere whispers, I just want to close a door behind me. A real one, with a handle and everything. The mess erupts in laughter, but it's the laughter of people who understand exactly what that fantasy means. You finish your coffee and move aft for your shift, stepping into the quiet hum of the control room. Screens glow softly, sonar pings faintly, and the boat responds to tiny adjustments with the grace of an animal that knows how to move through darkness. And as you work, the truth settles in. The submarine may be one of the most advanced machines humans have ever built. But the crew inside is still made of the same impulses, fears, hopes, and unspoken desires that sailors have carried across oceans for thousands of years. That's where the modern wrinkle comes in. Today's submariners aren't just dealing with stress or confinement. They're dealing with identity in a way earlier generations never openly acknowledged. The unspoken attraction, the buried longing, the quiet crushes, the complicated feelings, the discomfort, the curiosity, all the messy human emotions that surface when you live inches from one another for months at a time. And compared to older eras, there's something else too. An awareness that people are allowed to be more than just uniforms. You hear casual conversations about relationships, orientation, fear of missing home, uncertainty about the future, topics that would have been unthinkable on a Cold War boat. Not lectures, not confessions, just honest words quietly shared during watch rotations or over instant noodles at 2 a.m. The boat hasn't changed much in shape, but the world outside has. So the way people handle the silence inside has changed too. Modern submariners are more open, just not loudly. More thoughtful, just not publicly. More aware of each other, just not in a way that crosses any lines. What holds everything together isn't denial anymore. It's maturity. A culture built on mutual respect. Your feelings are valid. Your conduct is critical. Your humanity is noted, but not judged. Even the chaplain, when he visits before deployment, seems to understand this shifting landscape. He offers words that fit both old and new submariners. Out here, you're not asked to stop being human. You're only asked to be responsible with the human you are. By the time your shift ends, you feel the boat turning softly. An adjustment in depth, a slight course change. You pass through compartments where sailors nap, read polished tools, or stare quietly at nothing. The hum of the reactor sounds almost like breathing now, steady and protective. You stop near the ladder and rest your hand on the cool metal rail, listening to the silence between mechanical thumps. You think about all the weeks underwater, all the tensions swallowed, all the jokes shared, all the moments of longing managed with grace, all the nights when you stared at steel walls and let your mind drift toward people and places the ocean can't reach. And then something unexpected warms your chest pride. Not the loud kind, just a quiet acknowledgement that surviving this environment makes you stronger than you realized. You climb back toward the berthing area, the dim red lights guiding your steps. The submarine feels smaller than ever, but also strangely gentler, as if it has softened you, reshaped you, tested you, and taught you how resilient the human mind can be when pressed from all sides. Before turning into your bunk, you take one last glance down the passageway, the same narrow artery of pipes, cables, boots, elbows, and weary faces you've known for months. And you whisper a truth that feels earned. You handled it, all of it. Then you slip behind the curtain, breathe in the familiar recycled air, and feel the boat cradle you like a lullaby. Whatever the ocean demands next, you are ready. After months sealed inside a steel tube beneath the waves, you finally drift into the quiet rhythm that defines life underwater. The hum of machinery becomes your heartbeat. The narrow passageways, your entire world, and every routine watches meals, drills blends into a slow mechanical dance. So now take a breath, settle in, and step into a day in the life of submarine sailors. You wake to the sound of metal breathing, and for one disorienting moment, you can't tell if it's you or the submarine. That's how mornings begin down here, if you can even call them mornings. There's no sunrise on a submarine, only the soft hum of machinery and the faint red glow that means it's time whether your body believes it or not. You blink into the dimness, staring at the ceiling that sits exactly 6 inches above your nose. Your rack, the Navy's polite word for a coffin-shaped bunk, is warm stale and packed so tight you could touch both walls without fully extending your arms. You shift an inch and bump the springs of the rack above you. Someone snores. Someone mutters in their sleep. Someone's foot dangles in the aisle because they forgot to pull it in before dozing off. Welcome to the underwater dormitory. No windows, no privacy, no personal space, and definitely no graceful wake-ups. You push your curtain aside and a wave of submarine air hits you, part machine oil, part body heat, part last night's reheated stew. It's the kind of smell that would terrify a scented candle company. The deck is cold on your bare feet as you slide out sideways because there's no such thing as getting up in a submarine rack. You extract yourself like a careful archaeological dig. A sailor brushes past, mumbling a tired morning, even though it could just as easily be 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. The watch schedule turns time into a suggestion. You rub your face trying to remember what day it is. On a submarine, days blur faster than ink in seawater. As you pull on your uniform, you hear the same sounds that make up every underwater morning. The steady whir of air scrubbers fighting to keep CO2 from turning the whole crew sleepy. The distant rumble of the reactor steady as a giant mechanical heartbeat. The clank of someone hitting their head on a pipe. A quiet curse that follows. If you've ever wondered why submariners walk slightly hunched even on land, now you know. You squeeze into the narrow passageway, dodging a valve that someone swears moved an inch overnight. A guy coming off watch shuffles past with that 1,000-yard stare submariners reserve for hour 6 of staring at screens. He gives you a nod, the underwater version of a handshake high five and hug combined, because down here gestures must be efficient. As you move forward, you catch a sailor brushing his teeth directly over a tiny stainless steel sink no wider than a shoebox. Another struggles to shave without elbowing the guy next to him. One drops his razor, watches it clatter into a drain size, and mutters, "Yeah, that's gone forever." You want to pat his back, but there's literally no room. Have you ever tried brushing your hair while someone else brushes their teeth 2 inches from your shoulder? Submariners do it daily. And somehow, nobody panics. The boat teaches you patience, the kind monks dream of. Someone behind you asks, "Did we get fresh air last night?" Someone else answers, "Define fresh." Everyone chuckles because they all know the truth. Recycled submarine air tastes like warm plastic mixed with teamwork. You reach the ladder that leads toward the central corridor and grip the rail's cold metal slightly damp from condensation. The whole boat shifts gently with underwater currents, and for a second you feel weightless. As you climb, your hand slides over a worn spot in the rail. Generations of sailors have touched this same place, all moving through the same ritual of waking, inside a floating metal tube that refuses to let the ocean crush it. There's something oddly comforting about it, like being part of a long tradition of people who willingly traded daylight for steel walls and trust in engineering. Admiral Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy, once said, "Submariners needed a special kind of toughness." As you pull yourself up the ladder, you finally understand what he meant. Not toughness of muscle, but toughness of patience, routine, and a stubborn willingness to keep going even when your alarm clock is a pipe vibrating above your head. A petty officer passes you with a clipboard nodding toward the galley. "If you hurry, you might catch the last of the powdered eggs," he says with a smirk. You nod back because you know that on a submarine, breakfast is a competitive sport. Miss it, and you're eating a granola bar you hid behind the fire extinguisher 3 days ago. As you continue forward, the boat hums around you. Pipes rattle. The hull creaks softly. Somewhere in the dark water outside, pressure presses against the steel like an ancient beast sniffing the edges of the world. And yet, inside this narrow maze, you walk barefoot, scratching the back of your neck, trying to remember where you left your watch cap. You catch your reflection in a polished metal panel, puffy-eyed, slightly wrinkled hair doing something defiant. You look exactly like every submariner looks in the first 10 minutes of being awake, halfway between determined and confused. Your stomach growls, reminding you that breakfast is the next quest. But before moving on, you take one slow breath, the kind submariners savor, letting the hum settle into your bones, because as strange as it sounds, this steel cocoon has become home. You shuffle toward the galley, letting the hum of the boat guide you like a hallway-sized lullaby. Down here, breakfast isn't just a meal. It's a minor miracle performed inside a space barely bigger than a walk-in closet. The smell hits you first. Powdered eggs, reheated bacon, something vaguely bready that might once have been toast, and the unmistakable aroma of submarine coffee, so strong it could probably clean corroded pipes if someone poured it wrong. The passageway narrows as you approach the galley, forcing everyone into a single-file human caterpillar. A sailor ahead of you mutters, "If we were any closer, we'd qualify as one organism." You laugh because it's true. Submarine breakfast lines redefine personal space so thoroughly you sometimes forget what arm's length means. You squeeze into the serving line, sliding your tray along the rail, while the cook bright-eyed in that suspicious way only submarine cooks can be slops, a yellow scoop onto your plate. Eggs, he says, though they look more philosophical than biological. You take them anyway. Down here, you don't question breakfast. Breakfast wins. Always. You scan for an empty seat but realize empty is a fantasy invented by surface sailors. Instead, you find a tiny sliver of bench between two men locked in a silent contest of who can inhale food faster. You sit. Your knee hits someone's thigh. Someone else's elbow claims part of your rib cage. And yet nobody complains. This is galley life elbows humor and the hope the cook made the bacon crispy today. Across the table, a sailor stares deeply into his mug, like he's trying to remember which continent coffee beans come from. He looks up and grins. "You know what I miss most," he says. "Cereal that crunches." You grin back. Try eating it next to the engine room. The vibration might crunch it for you. The table chuckles the quiet, tired chuckle of men who've spent too long underwater to waste energy on full-volume laughter. Galley breakfast is also where gossip thrives. Someone mentions the XO nearly hitting his head on a pipe. Someone else swears he saw a fish through the periscope that looked judgmental. And then there's the eternal debate. Is submarine coffee actually coffee, or is it a new element discovered accidentally by the U.S. Navy? But between the jokes and the eggs that aren't really eggs, you feel something else rising from the chatter unity. Breakfast is the one moment the entire crew becomes a single organism. Tired, hungry, slightly confused, but moving forward together. As you eat, you hear the galley door swing open and shut open and shut. Sailors come off watch with hollow eyes and leave with slightly less hollow ones. The mess cooks never stop moving. They flip pans, refill trays, wipe counters, and somehow produce food for 90 people in a space smaller than a food truck. If submarine sailors are the heart of the boat galley, cooks are the caffeine inside that heart. At the far end of the table, someone taps the metal surface and says, "Remember what Admiral Flucky used to tell his crew? Good food equals good morale." The table nods. Flucky, the legendary WW2 sub-skipper, understood morale better than anyone, and even in 2025, his philosophy echoes through cramped mess halls just like this one. You shovel another fork full of eggs into your mouth, surprisingly grateful for the blandness. Down here, even mediocrity becomes comforting. Routine becomes flavor. Predictability becomes luxury. A question pops into your mind, one you almost ask out loud. When was the last time you ate while not touching another person's arm? The thought makes you smile. You lean slightly left to reach the salt shaker, and 3 people automatically shift in a perfectly choreographed submarine dance. It's muscle memory, everyone adjusting their bodies like gears in a machine. Someone at the far end groans dramatically. "We've got blueberry pancakes tomorrow," he announces. You know what that means. Mass chaos. Your table replies in unison, "Exactly. I'm setting an alarm for 5 minutes early." You're midway through chewing when the loudspeaker crackles to life. A voice announces the next watch rotation, and instantly half the mess stands up in a synchronized groan. Trays clatter. Boots shuffle. Bodies squeeze past each other in movements that would look ridiculous anywhere else, but feel completely normal down here. You aren't on the next watch, so you sit a moment longer, soaking in the warmth of the galley, the only place on the submarine that sometimes feels alive with energy instead of machinery. The lights buzz softly. The room rocks with gentle underwater motion, and the smell of strong coffee wraps around everything, like a blanket that's seen too many winter deployments. You finally scrape the last bit of eggs from your tray stand and slip into the narrow passageway. A sailor coming from the opposite direction raises his mug and asks coffee. You shake your head. "Bold choice," he says, before disappearing into the galley vortex. You adjust your cover, stretch your shoulders, and let your feet lead you toward the next part of the day. The part where routine turns into duty and duty turns into the quiet heartbeat of life underwater. You ease out of the galley, still tasting submarine coffee on your tongue, and step into the narrow passageway where the real heartbeat of the boat lives: the watch rotation. It's the rhythm that rules everything down here, more powerful than sunrise calendars or whatever day the outside world thinks it is. On a submarine, life isn't Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's on watch, off watch, almost watch, or supposed to be sleeping before watch. You head toward control, already settling into that familiar mental shift where your brain clicks from breakfast survivor to responsible operator of a billion-dollar underwater machine. The lighting shifts to that dim bluish glow that never changes, never wavers. Submarine ambiance at its finest. A sailor passing by bumps your shoulder, lightly nods, and says, "Welcome to the grind, shipmate." And it is a grind, just not the loud, dramatic kind people imagine. Submarine duty is slow endurance, like walking on a treadmill that quietly stretches into infinity. You slip through the watertight door, ducking under yet another pipe, and enter the nerve center of the boat. The atmosphere here is different, quieter, sharper. Every console hums with purpose. The air feels cooler. Even voices shrink into murmurs as sailors trade places like dancers in a cramped, dim-lit choreography. The off-watch section looks exhausted, eyes half-closed, movements loose and lazy. The oncoming section, including you, looks only slightly better. But as soon as each person sits at their station, something changes. Backs straighten, faces sharpen. You can feel the boat noticing. You take your seat at your console, sliding on the headphones and glancing at your gauges. The soft electronic beeps and low vibrations settle into your bones like a familiar lullaby. It's funny how noise can become comfort underwater. You run your checks the same way you always do. Verify readings, log your start time, scan for anomalies. Pretend you aren't still thinking about those eggs. Everything feels routine, but nothing is mindless. Submarines don't reward autopilot. They reward vigilance, the quiet, persistent awareness that the world pressing in from all sides is not something to take lightly. Have you ever been inside a room so quiet you could hear your heartbeat? A submarine control room on watch is like that. Except instead of your heartbeat, it's the constant hum of systems keeping 90 people from becoming a National Geographic special. Someone near you whispers, "How's it looking?" You whisper back, like an endless blue void filled with existential dread. He laughs silently, shoulders shaking. Humor is currency down here, cheap, renewable, and absolutely necessary. A petty officer leans in behind you, checking a panel. He taps the glass lightly. "If you can hear it, it's working," he mutters. Then he points toward a dial you've been watching. "Remember, if that one drifts too far, we all get very unhappy very fast." You nod because that is the submarine's entire philosophy, condensed into a sentence. Your mind drifts occasionally, never far enough to be dangerous, just far enough to keep you sane. You think about the surface and wonder if the weather is sunny. You imagine walking outside without ducking under a pipe every 3 feet. You picture a sky so big, it would feel unbelievable after weeks of metal ceilings. Then the sonar operator murmurs something, and the room subtly shifts. You're reminded why you're here. Watch isn't just a job, it's protection. Every small anomaly in the water, every strange sound, every inconsistent reading could mean something. Fish, whales, another vessel, or simply the ocean playing tricks on you. Sonar calls out merchant traffic, distant bearing. The officer of the deck acknowledges, adjusts posture, and the room exhales. Even mundane contacts feel important when the sea is your entire world. As time moves forward or sideways, it's hard to tell. Underwater, your body settles deeper into the rhythm. Your hands hover over controls with practiced familiarity. Your eyes scan, return scan again. Your brain holds a tiny flame of focus that doesn't burn out until someone taps your shoulder and says the magic words, "You're relieved." Off-watch sailors slide in and take your place with the same sleepy determination you had earlier. You nod, trade brief updates, and peel yourself away from the console, feeling your spine protest. Control room seats are not designed for comfort. They're designed to keep you awake, alert, and slightly irritated by hour 3. You stretch as you step out of the space, letting the tension drain from your shoulders. Your knees crack. Your back pops. You feel 30 years older and strangely proud of it. The watch is done, but the day is far from over. You move through the passageway with the sluggish grace of someone who's been awake just long enough to be tired, but not long enough to justify a nap. As the submarine hums around you, you think briefly about how this cycle repeats endlessly and somehow never truly gets old. The watch rotation may be relentless, but it's also the backbone of your underwater life. It turns the metal tube into something living, breathing, functioning. And in a small, quiet way, it turns you into something steady, too. You step into the sonar room, and the darkness wraps around you, like a secret the ocean hasn't decided whether to keep or share. The shift from the bright hum of control to the dim sanctuary of sonar is immediate, like walking from a busy street into a planetarium. The lights are low. The screens glow soft blue, and the air feels cooler, almost chilled by concentration. If the submarine has a heartbeat, this is where you hear it most clearly. You ease into the room, letting your eyes adjust to the shadows. Sailors sit hunched over acoustic displays, headphones pressed to their ears, listening to the ocean the way astronomers study the stars. Attentive, reverent, half in awe and half in worry. Sonar techs will tell you the sea has moods, whispers, quirks. And when you sit here long enough, you start to believe them. You take your seat beside one of the operators, a veteran with an uncanny ability to tell the difference between a merchant ship propeller and a shrimp flicking its tail. He doesn't look up when you settle in, just mutters, "Quiet night." The ocean's whispering instead of shouting, and gestures to his waterfall display. You glance at the drifting lines and shifting frequencies, trying to interpret them the way he does, with instinct instead of guesswork. He taps a faint trace on the screen. That's a distant trawler. Probably old. A few seconds later, he taps another. That's fish. Lots of fish. His voice dips conspiratorially. Angry ones, maybe. You chuckle quietly because even in the deepest silence of the boat, humor survives. Sonar rooms in history haven't changed much. Crews sat in similar darkness, straining to hear enemy screws through the static. A famous submariner, Commander Dudley Mush Morton, used to say that good ears were worth more than sharp eyes underwater. Sitting here now, you understand exactly what he meant. Sound is your only window. Everything else is steel and imagination. The room vibrates softly with the boat's motion, and you let your breathing fall in sync with it. The low hum of the reactor, the gentle sway, the beeps that sound like heartbeat monitors. All of it blends into a kind of underwater music. It's soothing until it isn't, because at any moment, a new sound might cut through the approaching rumble of another submarine, the mechanical clank of a distant ship, or something stranger that the ocean refuses to explain. Every sonar tech has a story about a sound they couldn't identify. A long moan that didn't match any marine life. A pulsing beat that vanished the moment they tried to record it. A metallic scrape in open water where no ship should be. You ask the operator beside you, "Ever hear something you couldn't name?" He pauses, eyebrow raised in a way that makes you immediately curious. Once he says, "But I'm saving that story for when we hit port." You grin knowing that half the fun of submarine life is the stories you can't fully tell until you're on dry land with a drink in your hand. The room dips into another long stretch of silence, broken only by the faint hiss of the ocean outside. You lean in closer, listening. The water carries distant echoes, tiny sounds magnified by thousands of tons of pressure. It's strangely calming, like listening to rain on a rooftop from under a heavy blanket. One of the younger sailors whispers, "Does it ever freak you out that all that water is just..." There you tilt your head. "What do you mean?" "I mean millions of gallons of ocean pressing on the hull and we're just sitting here listening to shrimp click." You laugh under your breath. When you say it like that, it sounds worse. He nods seriously. Everything sounds worse in sonar. He's not wrong. This room holds the quiet tension of possibility of what might be lurking out there. A merchant ship is fine. A whale is fine. Another submarine. That's when adrenaline slices through the calm, and even the hum changes pitch in your head. For now, though, the ocean is gentle. A few scattered contacts, none threatening. You settle deeper into your chair, shoulders loose, letting the steady patterns on the screen soothe your thoughts. It's almost hypnotic, the waterfall display, drifting like digital rain, the soft blips marking harmless life in the vast dark. You wouldn't expect it, but sonar watch is where you feel the most connected to the sea. You can't see, you can't touch it, but you hear it, the planet breathing, shifting, speaking in a language of frequencies and echoes. If you ever forget how small humans are, sonar will remind you. Quietly, firmly, a faint vibration ripples through the deck. The boat changes depth slightly, a subtle adjustment you feel more than see. The operator beside you glances at his display, nods once, and murmurs, "Smooth." It's the highest compliment a submarine can receive. Smooth means safe. Smooth means invisible. Smooth means the ocean hasn't decided to argue with you today. You lean back, close your eyes for a moment, and let the sounds drift through your headphones like a lullaby. In a strange way, the sonar room feels like the calmest place underwater. A pocket of focus where the world shrinks to whispers and waiting. When you finally stand to stretch your legs, your spine cracks softly and the darkness clings to your eyes for a few seconds. You step out into the brighter passageway, blinking as if you've just left a movie theater. The submarine hums on, carrying you from silence into the next rhythm of the day. You blink yourself back into the corridor's brighter light, rubbing your eyes as the hum of the boat grows steadier around you. Sonar quiet has a way of making the rest of the submarine feel loud, even when it isn't. You take a few steps, and the deck plates vibrate beneath your boots, the soft percussion of machinery working just inches beyond the bulkheads. That's when the PA system crackles, and a voice calmly announces a drill. Of course it does. Nothing snaps you out of ocean listening mode faster than the Navy reminding you that danger never asks for permission. Within seconds, the passageway transforms from sleepy to purposeful. Sailors move with practiced urgency, not frantic, not chaotic, just sharp. You follow the flow, squeezing past bodies as everyone heads toward assigned stations. Even down here, drills come without warning. Fire, flooding, loss of power. You never know which scenario will be thrown at you, but you know the choreography by heart. A petty officer hands out air masks with the same casual tone someone on land might use to hand out napkins. Mask up. Calm and steady, just like always. You slip yours over your head, the rubber sealing snug around your face. The first breath tastes like dry plastic, and the faint scent of disinfectant comforting in the strange way submariners learn to love anything familiar. The lights shift. Red strobes blink in the distance. Alarms wail with a pitch that cuts through bone. The whole submarine seems to tighten, as if holding its breath alongside the crew. You grab the nearest handrail as the boat tilts slightly, a simulated loss of trim maneuver slipping into your muscles like a reflex you didn't know you had. Someone calls out a report, simulated fire in compartment 2. Another voice responds instantly. Ventilation secured, you join in your own actions, flowing so naturally you barely think about them. There's no hesitation, no confusion. The submarine demands unity, the way the ocean demands pressure, absolutely without exception. You help check hatches, run your hands along the cold metal seals, confirming they're dogged tight. The metal thumps under your palm with the reassuring solidity you've learned to trust. It's strange, but during drills, you feel a connection to the submarine itself, like you and the machinery are partners trying to outsmart the ocean together. The chief strides past, mask on, voice booming through the rubber as he shouts updates. He's calm, controlled, but there's an edge to him, the same edge you've seen in veterans who've lived through the real thing. He's earned that edge. It's the kind of authority you don't question. A new sailor struggles with a latch, and you jump in beside him, steadying the mechanism with a quick push. His eyes widen in gratitude. You don't say much. No one wastes breath during drills, but the nod you trade carries the same weight as a paragraph. Down here, teamwork isn't a slogan. It's the only reason the submarine doesn't become a headline. As the drill continues, you hear the simulated casualty scenario escalate. Flooding in compartment 3, someone calls. You feel a ripple run through the boat muscles, clench movements sharpen. Even though everyone knows it isn't real, your body doesn't fully believe it. The Navy designs drills to be convincing because the ocean won't be polite when the real emergency comes. You help haul equipment, check valves, and coordinate with the sailors beside you. At one point, you feel the air grow warmer, as though the boat itself is sweating under the strain. That warmth reminds you of historical accounts from Wabuipu diesel boats, where real fires broke out in engine rooms, so hot men had to crawl to avoid blistering temperatures. You think of those sailors' smoke-filled compartments choking fumes, and you're quietly grateful for the systems that surround you now. History casts long shadows underwater. After what feels like an hour, but is probably 15 minutes, the alarms abruptly silence. The lights return to their normal glow. A voice crackles over the PA drill complete. Secure all stations. It's like hearing the word cut on a movie set. Everyone exhales at once, tension evaporating into the recycled air. You pull off your mask and inhale deeply, letting the familiar submarine atmosphere fill your lungs again. Someone next to you fans his face comically and jokes, "Well, that woke me up better than coffee." A ripple of chuckles spreads down the corridor, not loud but warm. As you return the mask to its cabinet, you notice your hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline you didn't realize was flooding your system. Submarine drills do that. They push your body to the edge of readiness, because that edge is where survival lives. You slip into the passageway as sailors disperse in all directions, each heading back to whatever version of routine they were in before the drill crashed into it. Someone behind you sighs and says, "I swear these drills age me faster than the sea." You smile, stretching your shoulders. "Think of it this way," you reply. "At least it's proof we're ready." And that's the truth you carry with you as you move forward. The submarine may be unforgiving. The ocean may be relentless, and the pressure may be unimaginable. But the crew learns to rise to every scenario, real or imagined, because there's no other choice when steel and water are your only witnesses. You drift away from the drill, still feeling the echo of adrenaline in your fingertips, and the submarine seems to breathe along with you. Slow, steady, as if pleased you handled another round of chaos. Moving aft, you follow a corridor that tightens, dips, and finally opens into one of the most strangely comforting spaces on the whole boat, the torpedo room. It shouldn't feel comforting. Everything in here is metal-thick straps, hydraulic rails, and weapons that could alter the geography of a coastline. But somehow, in the strange logic of submarine life, this compartment becomes one of the most human areas on board. Maybe it's the open floor space. Maybe it's the cool air. Maybe it's the odd cathedral-like silence that hangs between the polished torpedo tubes. Whatever it is, sailors gravitate here the same way tired commuters gravitate toward park benches. A couple of crew members sit on the deck backs against a torpedo canister boots, off socks mismatched. One guy is fixing a tear in his pant leg with needle and thread. Another is half asleep, arms folded over his chest head, slowly tilting like a faulty metronome. A third is writing a letter using the flat surface of a shipping crate. You step in quietly, careful not to disturb them, but they look up anyway because nothing happens unnoticed in this compartment. One of them waves you over. "Come sit," he says. "The torpedoes won't bite." Probably. You drop down beside him, letting the cool metal seep through your uniform. The torpedo room is always a few degrees colder than the rest of the boat. A fact everyone appreciates in ways polite conversation cannot express. You lean back and let your eyes trace the overhead pipes. The room vibrates with the soft hum of the ship's machinery, steady, predictable, almost soothing. You know, someone says this is the only place where I don't feel like I'm about to elbow someone in the kidney. Another guy nods vigorously. And the only place the air doesn't smell like burnt socks. This sparks a debate about which part of the submarine smells the worst. The galley garbage bin takes the early lead. The crew's shared laundry bag comes in at a disturbing second. A joker claims the engine room smells like ambition and questionable decisions. You laugh quietly because humor in a submarine isn't decoration. It's survival gear. In older diesel boats, sailors often slept between torpedoes when bunks ran out. Veterans still talk about it with pride, like people who once lived in impossible apartments and brag about the rent being only $12. You remember reading an account by a W2 submariner who wrote, "The torpedo room was cold, cramped, and loud. But it was the only place we felt like we weren't breathing someone else's exhale." Sitting here now, you can almost feel the ghosts of those old crews lounging in the same spots, stretching their legs beside the same rails. A younger sailor nearby taps the floor with his boot. You ever think about how weird it is that we relax next to the most expensive equipment on the boat? Someone shrugs. "Cheapest couch we've got." You grin, and it never complains about crumbs. One sailor throws a small rubber ball across the compartment. It bounces off a bulkhead and rolls back toward him. He catches it without looking, as if the floor plan is tattooed in his muscle memory. Casual games like this happen all the time. Catch dice cards, improvised versions of sports that would horrify anyone who cares about safety inspection reports. Yet nothing ever gets out of hand. Everyone knows the line between playful and reckless, and nobody even toes it. You watch the ball arc through the air again and think this is what monotony looks like underwater. Not boredom exactly, but a kind of soft resignation mixed with companionship. You can't go outside, you can't take a walk, you can't open a window. So you make a room full of torpedoes feel like a living room. And somehow, bizarrely, it works. One of the older petty officers sits down beside you, stretching out his legs. "You know why people like it here?" he asks quietly. You tilt your head. "Because it's cooler." He shakes his head. "Because it feels open. Open enough to remember you're still a person and not just a cog." You let that settle for a moment. It's true. There's something grounding about being able to sit with your back against solid metal and not feel the immediate pressure of 20 bodies squeezing past. You take a deep breath, still submarine air, still slightly metallic, but somehow cleaner here, and let the coolness settle your nerves. Someone starts telling a story about a torpedo man on an older sub who accidentally fell asleep on top of a dummy training round and got caught snoring by the XO. The way it's told, the man woke up saluted, rolled off the torpedo like a log, and carried on with his day. The entire compartment laughs softly, not to disturb others, but with genuine warmth. You find yourself smiling for no specific reason. Maybe it's the stillness. Maybe it's the quiet companionship. Or maybe it's because for once, you're not performing or focusing or reacting. You're just being inside a machine designed to go where humans were never meant to live. After a few minutes, you push yourself to your feet, stretching your back until it pops. The sailors nod to you as you leave, one giving a lazy salute, another tossing the rubber ball your way, just to keep things interesting. You toss it back with a soft arc, watching it bounce and roll across the deck with calm predictability. As you step into the corridor again, the submarine seems to tighten around you, hallways, narrower ceilings, lower the hum, slightly louder. And you realize that the comfort of the torpedo room wasn't the space itself, but the people in it. The subtle way, companionship makes even the coldest metal feel warm. You don't notice how hungry you are until the entire submarine suddenly smells like hope, disguised as reheated lunch. That's how midday begins underwater. Not with sunlight, not with clocks, but with the unmistakable aroma of something warm drifting through steel corridors. You follow it like a cartoon character floating toward a pie on a windowsill. Except your pie is usually spaghetti that's been holding on since the last port call. Still down here, even average food earns applause. You squeeze into the galley again, this time joining the midday stampede. Breakfast is sleepy, but lunch. Lunch is gossip hour, comedy show therapy session, and community bulletin board rolled into one metal cave. The moment you sit, a sailor beside you taps your shoulder and asks, "What's the rumor today?" And that right there is how lunchtime begins, with the sacred ritual of submarine gossip. Someone leans in dramatically, whispering, "I heard the XO." XO tried to fix a clog in the head and got sprayed. Someone else adds, "I heard he screamed loud enough for sonar to pick it up." Another sailor nods seriously. Confirmed. Deck crew said the echo came back with emotional damage. Laughter ripples across the table, quiet enough not to disturb nearby watchstanders, but mischievous enough to feel like rebellion. You poke at your tray and take a bite of whatever miracle the cooks have produced. Submarine cooks are legends, not because the food is fancy, but because they turn limited supplies into comfort. They're the closest thing to wizards the Navy has. One of them could probably make Las Vegas-style buffet magic out of a can of beans and leftover toast. Across the table, a sailor waves his fork like a philosopher. Food is morale, he says, echoing an old Navy truth. Bad food means bad mood. He takes a bite, nods thoughtfully, and adds, "Does mood's decent today?" Midday is also when everyone talks about everything, except the submarine itself. Sports teams they haven't seen play for weeks. Stories from home, weird dreams, theories about what day it might be. Someone suggests it's Thursday. Someone else swears it's Monday. A third insists time stopped completely last Tuesday, and nobody noticed. No one wins this debate because everyone is equally wrong. Then slowly the real conversations surface, the ones that reveal the quiet emotional battle submariners wage every day. A sailor across from you says he dreams of standing barefoot on grass. Another talks about missing the sound of wind. Someone else admits he just wants to drive a car again, even if it's to the dentist. These little confessions drift across the table like messages in bottles. No drama, no big speeches, just quiet truths shared over steamed vegetables and lukewarm tea. And strangely, these tiny admissions make the boat feel larger, softer, more human. Halfway through eating, you hear the clatter of utensils as the crew instinctively shifts to make space for someone else squeezing into the table. Lateral compression is a language down here. Tiny shifts, tiny nods, tiny adjustments. Everyone moves like synchronized swimmers trapped in a broom closet. For a moment, the conversation dips, and you feel the submarine sway gently, barely noticeable, just enough to remind you the world outside isn't still. You glance at the ceiling, hear the faint hum of the reactor, sense the water pressing from every direction like a living blanket. It should feel claustrophobic. But here at the lunch table with sailors telling jokes and trading stories, it feels oddly normal. Like a family dinner held inside a very committed industrial pipe. Then someone at the far end clears his throat with the seriousness of a town crier. "All right," he says, question of the day. Everyone leans in, and he asks if you could teleport anywhere for one meal. Just one, where would you go? The table erupts backyard barbecue. Pho from that place near base. My mom's spaghetti. Anywhere with fresh lettuce. Literally any restaurant with windows. Someone nudges you. Your turn. Teleport food fantasy. You think for a second, then answer honestly, a sandwich. One that isn't shaped like a rectangle of despair. The table approves. Laughter and stories continue until trays start to empty and people peel away for their next duties. The galley becomes a revolving door crew finishing lunch. Others just starting a few, grabbing leftovers to eat standing up between compartments. Before you leave, a sailor taps your shoulder. "Hey," he says quietly. "Good lunch today." He doesn't mean the food. He means the company. He means the laughter. He means the moment of lightness in a world with no sun. You nod, tray in hand, and step back into the corridor where the hum returns. The air cools and duty quietly waits for you to catch up. Lunch fades behind you like a warm memory, tucked inside the submarine's cold steel. You drift back into the passageway with the last warmth of lunchtime still clinging to you. It fades quickly, replaced by the familiar chill of steel and the low thrum of machinery working deeper in the hull. This is the part of the day where the submarine stops feeling like a crowded cafeteria and starts feeling like a factory in motion. Maintenance isn't glamorous, but it's the glue that holds everything together, which is ironic because half your job is tightening bolts that really do not want to stay tightened. You grab your tool pouch and head aft, ducking under pipes as you go. The air gets warmer the closer you get to the machinery spaces, that unmistakable blend of hot metal and lubricant that no candle company will ever attempt to recreate. A machinist's mate nods as you arrive, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "Perfect timing," he says. "This valve is doing its impression of a toddler refusing bedtime." You lean in, inspect the stubborn mechanism, and hear the faint hiss it shouldn't be making. With the deck vibrating beneath your boots, you adjust your stance and start working, feeling each turn of the wrench through your fingertips. Maintenance on a submarine is tactile. Every sound, every vibration, every temperature shift means something. You become fluent in the boat's body language over time. A petty officer passes behind you carrying a checklist long enough to qualify as light reading. Remember, he says without looking up, if the valve protests, it's because you're winning. The comment hangs in the warm air, perfectly matching the mix of sweat sarcasm and silent competence that defines this part of life underwater. While you work, you notice how calm everyone seems, despite the heat and noise. Maintenance is where submariners find a different kind of peace. Predictable tasks, steady motion, the comfort of doing something that your hands understand better than your brain sometimes does. There's a rhythm to it. Check, tighten, log, move on, like a quiet ritual repeated all over the boat. You pause for a second, feeling the hum deepen under your feet. Somewhere far below, the reactor maintains its steady heartbeat. Somewhere above, the ocean presses down with ancient patience. And here you are tightening a bolt in a narrow metal artery, keeping everything in balance. It's humbling when you think about it, like being one cell in a massive living organism. A younger sailor slides up beside you with a flashlight. "Hey," he asks, "do you ever wonder how many bolts are on this boat?" You blink. "No." "Well, I did," he says proudly. "And I stopped halfway because my brain got tired." You smirk. That tracks. The two of you finish adjusting the valve, signing off the maintenance log with handwriting that definitely looks like it was done inside a moving steel tube. You wipe your hands on your coveralls and step back, watching the mechanism settle into a steady rhythm. Another tiny victory. Another piece of the boat running the way it should. Further aft, you help inspect a junction box. You lie awkwardly on your side, flashlight clenched between your teeth, trying not to drop a screw that would immediately become submarine folklore. "Careful," someone warns. Gravity in here is selective. It won't catch you if you fall, but it will catch every screw you ever drop. You manage to reinstall the cover without losing any critical hardware to the void beneath the deck plates, a triumph worth celebration in small circles. Nearby, two electricians debate the greatest engineering mystery of the boat, why wires always manage to tangle, even when nobody touches them. One insists there's a poltergeist on board. The other blames physics. Neither is technically wrong. As you move deeper into the machinery space, the heat becomes heavier, almost sticky. Sweat gathers at your temples. You wipe it away with a sleeve already damp from earlier tasks. Somewhere behind you, a fan kicks on with a rattling sigh that sounds almost human. For a moment, you think about shoreside life. Air conditioning, windows, silence that isn't manufactured. When was the last time you fixed something without ducking under a pipe, or the last time you reached for a wrench without bumping someone else's elbow? You shake the thought off, not with bitterness, but with a kind of quiet acceptance. This life is strange, but it's yours. A supervisor checks in as you finish logging your last task. "Good work," he says, tapping the clipboard. "Maintenance keeps us alive. Never forget that." It's a simple statement, but it settles into you like truth. The drills prepare you. The watch keeps you sharp. But maintenance keeps the ocean on the other side of the hull. You step back into the slightly cooler passageway, rolling your shoulders to ease the stiffness that mechanical spaces always leave behind. The hum of the boat feels lighter now, as if approving the work. You catch a faint smell of something cooking in the galley, a hint that the next part of the day is already warming up, waiting ready to pull the crew back together. The boat shifts gently, a small correction in depth or course. You steady yourself against the wall, feeling the motion move through you like a reminder you're inside one of the strangest, most demanding environments humans have ever chosen to live in. And somehow, through sweat jokes and stubborn bolts, you've helped keep it running for another hour. You walk forward again, stepping out of machinery heat and into the gentler hum of the living compartments. It's not exactly evening. Submarines don't really do evenings, but the atmosphere shifts in a way everyone feels. The lighting softens, the pace slows, and the crew starts drifting toward whatever counts as downtime in a steel tube that refuses to give anyone more than 3 square feet to themselves. You pass the small common area, really just a corner, with a bolted-down couch and a screen, and see a few sailors huddled together, watching a movie that's been played so many times the dialogue could probably be recited backwards. Someone jokes, If we run this film one more time, the characters are going to re-enlist. The room chuckles, not because the joke is new, but because familiar humor feels like a warm blanket when you're 1,000 feet underwater. You grab a seat at the edge of the compartment, letting your shoulders slump for the first time all day. The couch cushion has the texture of a gym mat, but at this point, it might as well be a luxury recliner. A sailor leans toward you and whispers, "Bet you $5 the XO walks in, right when the good part starts." You lift an eyebrow. "You mean the only part where something actually happens?" He nods solemnly. "Exactly. Movie nights on a submarine aren't really about the movie. They're about pretending for 20 quiet minutes that you're back on land with nothing more threatening than a buffer wheel or a petty officer with too much caffeine." You hear the muffled laughter from the group, and you feel the pressure of the day unwind little by little. Not everyone relaxes with movies. Some head to their racks with headphones disappearing behind curtains, the way people on land close bedroom doors. Some flip through old paperbacks left behind by crews from deployments long past. You pick one up once, an old Tom Clancy novel with pages so worn it felt like holding history. Submariners pass books down like inheritance. One sailor swears the galley copy of The Hunt for Red October has been on more deployments than most junior enlisted. Cards are another tradition. You pass a group deep in a game of spades, each face so serious it's as if the fate of the boat depends on who wins the next trick. "You're cheating," someone says. "No, you think I'm cheating?" another replies. "You two have been cheating since Guam," a third mutters. A fourth slams his hand on the table. That doesn't make it fair. The arguments are always mock serious, filled with the kind of exaggerated indignation only sleep-deprived sailors can maintain with straight faces. You keep moving, drawn by the faint sounds of someone playing music on tiny speakers. The melody is soft warbling through the recycled air like a lullaby, filtered through machinery. A sailor sits cross-legged on the deck back against a bulkhead, eyes closed, letting the tune wash over him. You pause to listen. Music hits different underwater. It feels contained, as if the steel walls absorb the notes and give them back gentled, softened. In a quieter corner near the berthing area, you find two sailors talking in low voices. Their faces are tired, but relaxed. Their bodies angled in that way people adopt when they trust each other. They're not discussing drills or maintenance or watch. That's the beauty of downtime. Instead, they're talking about normal things, what they'll do when they get home, how big their kids must look now where they want to travel someday, how strange it feels to imagine sunlight after so long without it. One sailor says he misses sitting on a porch during rainstorms. Another says he misses the smell of pine trees. A third admits he misses doing absolutely nothing without feeling guilty. The conversation drifts like the submarine itself. Slow, quiet, honest. You step into your own rack for a moment, pulling the curtain just to feel what passes for privacy here. It's not much, a thin cloth barrier that blocks sight but never sound. Still, in the world of submarines, this curtain becomes a sanctuary. Sailors decorate their rack ceilings with picture stickers, tiny battery lights. You run your fingers along the small shelf where letters, snacks, and personal treasures live. Somehow, this cramped space becomes your home, inside a home. You lie back for a minute listening. Not watching, not thinking, just listening. The submarine hums with a rhythm you've come to recognize, the soft whir of ventilation, the quiet pulse of electronics, the faint creaks of metal under pressure. The subtle shifting of sailors' footsteps overhead. There's a strange comfort to it, almost like the boat is rocking you toward rest. But downtime is fleeting. You push the curtain open again and rejoin the small river of sailors moving through the passageway. Someone tosses you a packet of cookies contraband from a care package. "Catch," he says. "These are basically currency down here. You tuck them into your pocket. You'll save them for a night when sleep won't come easy." As you continue forward, you notice a group gathering near the small exercise nook. A treadmill that squeaks like it's complaining about its existence. A stationary bike older than half the crew, and a few free weights. Someone tries jogging while holding onto the handrail with white knuckles. Another soldier rides the bike so slowly, it looks like he's trying not to wake it up. Everyone gives them a nod of encouragement anyway. On submarines, effort counts more than results. The smell of the galley drifts faintly again. Someone baking bread for tomorrow. Or maybe just warming up dough that hasn't yet accepted its fate. Evening, such as it is, begins to settle over the boat. You feel a softness in the air, less urgency, less noise, less weight pressing against your ribs. This is as close as a submarine gets to peace. Not silence, never silence. But the closest thing to quiet comfort a steel tube under pressure can offer. And as you move back toward berthing, letting the day loosen its grip inch by inch, you feel a faint, familiar drowsiness pulling at the edges of your thoughts. The boat hums. The lights dim. Conversations soften. And even in this strange metallic world, you can sense the whole crew easing toward rest, one slow breath at a time. You lie back in your rack and realize the submarine doesn't rock you to sleep. Your own heartbeat does sync perfectly with the hum of a machine deeper in the ocean than sunlight dares to go. That's how the final stretch of the day begins down here. Not with a sunset, not with stars, not with anything the surface world would recognize. It begins with vibration. The faint rhythmic thrum of systems older than most sailors on board, steady as a pulse, constant as gravity. You pull your curtain halfway closed and let the dim light from the passageway spill across your blanket. In any other place, this would feel cramped. Down here, it feels like a small universe wrapped in navy blue fabric. You shift your shoulders, letting the thin mattress settle beneath you. The springs give their usual metallic sigh, like they're greeting you after a long negotiation with gravity. You place one hand on the wall beside you. The steel is cool smooth, humming with the quiet energy of 1,000 moving parts. Everything around you feels alive, even though it's just machinery. Or maybe you've lived here long enough that the line starts to blur. From somewhere forward, you hear muffled laughter. A card game refusing to die out. Someone tells a bad joke. Someone groans. Someone claps their hands once in exaggerated despair. You don't catch the words, but the tone is unmistakable. Tired joy. Down here, joy doesn't burst. It flickers warm, steady, like a tiny lamp coaxed into existence by companionship. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the world contract around you. And strangely, your thoughts drift not to the submarine, but to the surface, the unseen world above your head. You imagine the ocean stretching upward in a column of darkness, a vast, shifting ceiling that most people will never understand. You picture invisible currents swirling fish gliding past, maybe even a whale singing somewhere far off. The idea of so much water overhead should feel terrifying. But tonight it feels like a blanket, a cold, heavy one, sure, but a blanket nonetheless. The crew moves around you with softened footsteps, the way people tiptoe in houses where children are sleeping. Someone climbs into the rack above yours, the mattress creaking gently. Another sailor brushes past your curtain, muttering, "Excuse me," in a whisper. Voices fade. The submarine settles into what passes for nighttime, a gentler version of constant work. And yet, even in this hush, the boat refuses to be completely quiet. A valve hisses. A relay clicks. The hull creaks as pressure nudges it like an impatient finger. The air system exhales every few seconds, steady as breathing. These sounds don't disturb you anymore. They've become your bedtime playlist, a metallic lullaby that no streaming service would dare replicate. You hear footsteps pause outside your rack. You awake, someone whispers. Sort of, you say. Your crewmate chuckles. Best kind of awake down here. He doesn't stay long, just long enough to ask whether you heard the rumor about tomorrow's dessert banana bread, which on submarines is basically a holiday. Then he moves on his boots, tapping out a rhythm that blends into the hull's vibrations. Little interactions like that feel bigger underwater. When space shrinks, kindness expands. You turn onto your side and let your thoughts wander again. You think about the old submariners, the men who sailed diesel-electric boats and who endured real darkness, real danger, real claustrophobia. You wonder what they'd think of this boat, of your rack, of your day. Probably they'd tell you that discomfort is just part of the bargain, that the ocean hasn't changed only the steel you hide inside. You breathe slowly, counting each inhale to ease your body toward rest. 1, the hum. 2, the vibration. 3, the loneliness eased by laughter. 4, the quiet courage it takes to sleep inside pressure thick as stone. You ask yourself a question, something you never say out loud. How does anyone get used to this? But the answer comes effortlessly now. You adapt because the crew adapts with you. You endure because the routine makes endurance possible. You sleep because you trust the people awake while you aren't. That last part matters more than anything. Trust is the currency of submarines. Without it, the boat collapses long before the hull ever could. You feel the submarine dip ever so slightly. A depth adjustment so small most people would miss it. But you feel it instantly, like the ocean shifting its weight. Your rack sways a fraction of an inch. You smile into your pillow, amused at how sensitive you've become to the smallest movements. On land, earthquakes might not wake you. Underwater, a 1-degree pitch feels like a roller coaster. The air grows cooler. The lights dim another notch as the night cycle continues its slow transition. Someone down the passageway yawns loudly enough to echo. Another sailor mutters for him to keep it down, though the annoyance is clearly affectionate. You pull the curtain fully closed now. The tiny hooks rasp softly against the rail. Inside your cocoon, darkness settles in completely. The world shrinks to the size of your rack, 3 feet wide, barely long enough for your legs, and somehow enough space to hold the day. You let your breathing slow. Let your muscles unclench. Let the vibration sink deeper into your chest. The submarine sways again, just slightly like a cradle on an ancient sea. And something about that motion loosens a final thread of tension inside you. The last thing you hear before drifting off isn't a voice or a machine. It's the ocean. Or rather, the ocean translated through steel, the soft, distant shifting of currents brushing against the hull, like the planet itself whispering you towards sleep. And there, hundreds of feet below the surface, wrapped in metal and darkness, and the faint scent of laundry detergent, you finally let go. Your eyes close. Your breathing deepens. The submarine hums. The ocean presses in. The crew settles into silence. And you, tired and weightless, sink into sleep, held not by a pillow or a mattress, but by the quiet, unshakable rhythm of life underwater. Down here where metal hums and the ocean whispers, you've lived a full day in the quiet heart of a submarine, sharing meals, routines, laughter, and the gentle courage that holds the crew together. Now let the sounds fade. Let your breath slow. and drift into sleep, as steady as the boat itself carried softly through the deep.